Building on renewal, where compliance becomes critical. In Section 7, we discussed license renewal and the importance of maintaining an active license. Now we take that concept one step further. What happens when that system fails? Unlicensed activity is one of the most serious violations in Arizona real estate, and it directly ties back to supervision, delegation, and broker responsibility. This section is not just about rules, it is about protecting the public, your brokerage, and ultimately your license. The key takeaway is simple. If someone is not properly licensed, they cannot perform licensed activity, period. The legal definition: AAC R4-28-306. Arizona law clearly defines unlawful license activity under AAC R4-28-306. Unlicensed activity includes performing acts that require a license without holding a current and active license, acting on behalf of a broker other than your employing broker, or a broker employing someone who is not properly licensed. This definition is broad and intentionally strict. It ensures that only qualified and licensed individuals are conducting real estate transactions, reinforcing consumer protection. Unlicensed activity in practice: how violations occur. Unlicensed activity does not always happen intentionally. In many cases, it occurs due to poor supervision or lack of systems. For example, an agent whose license expires may continue working without realizing it. Alternatively, an unlicensed assistant may step beyond administrative duties and begin discussing pricing or negotiating terms. In both cases, the violation exists regardless of intent. This ties directly back to earlier sections. Lack of supervision and unclear policies create unnecessary risk. Broker responsibility: the liability always comes back. One of the most important principles in Arizona real estate law is that the designated broker is responsible for all activities within the brokerage. If unlicensed activity occurs, ADRI will not only look at the individual involved, but also at the broker's systems. Did the broker have procedures in place to verify license status? Were assistants properly trained? Were activities clearly defined? If the answer is no, the broker may face discipline under ARS, paragraph 32-2153. Required reporting: when unlicensed activity happens. If unlicensed activity occurs, Arizona law requires immediate action. The individual must submit a written explanation, a statement acknowledging the violation, and documentation of all related transactions and compensation. Additionally, the designated broker must provide a signed statement identifying the unlawful activity. This reinforces the importance of transparency and accountability. Ignoring the issue only makes it worse. 30-day threshold: advisory versus discipline. Arizona law provides some flexibility for minor violations. If unlicensed activity occurs for less than 30 days, with no prior history and no pending complaints, the department may issue an advisory letter of concern rather than formal discipline. However, if the activity extends beyond 30 days, involves repeated violations, or results in consumer harm, the commissioner may impose serious disciplinary action, including suspension or revocation of the license. This distinction highlights an important concept. Small mistakes may be forgiven, but patterns of behavior are not. Unlicensed assistants: clearly defined boundaries. Unlicensed assistants are one of the most common sources of unlicensed activity. Arizona law allows assistants to perform administrative tasks, but strictly prohibits them from engaging in activities that require a license. Permitted activities include scheduling appointments, preparing marketing materials, and handling clerical work. However, assistants cannot discuss property details, provide pricing opinions, negotiate terms, or host open houses without a licensee present. These boundaries must be clearly defined in your office policy manual. Compensation rules: no loopholes allowed. Another critical aspect of unlicensed activity involves compensation. Under ARS, paragraph 32-2101 and paragraph 32-2153, compensation cannot be tied to the closing of a transaction for unlicensed individuals. This means an unlicensed assistant cannot be paid a commission or any performance-based compensation tied to a sale. Even indirect compensation structures can create violations. This reinforces a consistent theme throughout the course. Compensation must always align with licensing requirements, advertising and representation, disclosure matters. If an unlicensed assistant appears in advertising or marketing, they must be clearly identified as unlicensed. Failing to properly disclose this can mislead consumers and create additional violations. In today's digital marketing environment, where teams and assistants are often featured online, this is a growing area of risk. Real-world example. A common scenario. Consider a busy brokerage where an unlicensed assistant begins answering calls and discussing property details with potential buyers. Over time, they begin setting expectations about pricing and availability. While this may seem helpful, it crosses into licensed activity. If a complaint is filed, Adri will examine not just the assistant's actions, but the broker's supervision. Were there policies in place? Was the assistant trained? Was there oversight? This example reinforces a key lesson. What seems minor can quickly become a major violation. How this section connects to the bigger picture. This section ties directly back to everything we have covered. Supervision prevents unlicensed activity. Delegation must be done correctly to avoid violations. Policy manuals must clearly define roles. Legal discipline under ARS, paragraph 32 to 2153, often stems from unlicensed activity. As we continue forward, we will build on these concepts and connect them to risk management and brokerage operations as a whole. The pattern remains consistent. Clear systems, strong supervision, and defined roles are the keys to compliance. Online discussion. Question 1. Why is unlicensed activity treated so seriously under Arizona law? Answer: because it undermines consumer protection and violates AAC, R4-28-306, and ARS, paragraph 32-2153, exposing both the individual and broker to disciplinary action. Question 2. What is the broker's role when unlicensed activity occurs? Answer: the broker must report the activity, provide documentation, and demonstrate that proper supervision systems were in place to prevent the violation. Question 3. What is the most common cause of unlicensed activity in a brokerage? Answer: poor supervision and unclear boundaries, especially involving expired licenses or unlicensed assistants performing tasks beyond their allowed scope.